धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Good. So now we did not move from the, no, we did move from the 41. We are now doing chapter 11 and verse 55. Yes? So we did mat karma krut, we did mat paramaha, then we did to mat bhaktara. Okay. Now, just few days ago, we met Vivekananda. So we met and he was holding a view which is held by many scholars, and that is that in Upanishads, the text of Upanishads are highly analytical in nature. Okay? It's a lot of logic, it's a very tight kind of analysis and everything. But all of a sudden, Bhagavad Gita starts talking about bhakti, starts talking about, there is a Western view, if anybody is studying Hinduism, so they said that the scholarly viewpoint is that what was extremely intellectual is brought down to the accessibility of local people, and therefore there is this whole introduction of bhakti relating to Ishvara. All of that came much later. Okay? And the Bhagavad Gita is a lot more emphasizing on all of that than the logical, the so-called intellectual approach. Okay? Now the tradition differs from this view. You must understand that. Okay? The tradition, which is the Vedic tradition, the traditional teaching, which is not the Western academic teaching, what we say is, what is said in Upanishad is exactly what is said in Bhagavad Gita. You must understand that. Okay? And this is why at the end of every chapter, if you have Bhagavad Gita book, will see, exactly, it says, Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu. Right? So that means whatever is in Bhagavad Gita is exactly what is in the Upanishad. This is just the text, it's not my opinion. Right? What are the subject matters of Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita? Two subject matters. Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastra. Brahma Vidya is giving you the knowledge about who you are, right? And in that, very important, okay? In that analysis of who you are, the equation is between you and Ishvara. Tat Tvam Asi. Okay? So Tvam is you and Tat is Ishvara. So you can't make a statement that Upanishads are not talking about Ishvara. Anybody who says Upanishads are not talking about Ishvara, they don't know ABC of Upanishads. Because the whole equation is Tat Tvam Asi. Asi means equation is what Tat is Ishvara and Tvam is you. Right? So any analysis, anybody who says that Upanishads are just intellectual and they are just talking about this reality and Bhagavad Gita is talking about Ishvara, it doesn't understand what the texts are talking about. Okay? Now, what is, and then that is what we call Brahma Vidya part. You are equated to Ishvara. That is something which is beyond anybody's imagination. How can I be Ishvara? That is too big an equation to solve. Even E is equal to mc square is a very difficult equation to solve. What about me being equated to Ishvara? That is tough. Okay. Now, in order to solve that equation, you must understand that if you solve that equation at a wrong point, you make a huge error. As I keep saying, that if the equation is 3 plus 2 is equal to 6 minus 1, and if I don't understand the equation right, and if I say 3 plus 2 is equal to 6 minus 1, therefore 3 is equal to 6, plus is equal to minus, and 2 is equal to 1. Am I getting the equation right? I am making a huge error. Where is the point of resolution? There is a point of resolution of 3 plus 2 is equal to 6 minus 1. 5. In 5 is the resolution. Because 3 plus 2 is equal to what? 5. 6 minus 1 is equal to what? 5. So that means you need to understand the point of resolution. If you resolve it at the wrong place, you make a huge logical error. If you start thinking that because I am Ishvara, I am the cause of the time and space, or I am that intelligence which arranges everything together, you are on a trip. And that non-understanding has led to a lot of misconception in spiritual world, where they think that the person, the wise person, has all kinds of powers. And those powers are equated to Ishvara's power. Ishvara is all knowledge, which puts together all these atoms and particles together to create this whole universe. Ishvara is in form of all the different laws which governs the whole universe. Then you start thinking that this wise person becomes that. And that leads to a huge confusion. Right? So this is why Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita are all very, very clear what is the point of resolution. So that you stop making all these huge logical errors and start living from some kind of an imagination. Okay? So what it says is very simple. When you look into the truth of this individual form, what do you think you are? You think I am as good as the body, I am as good as the mind, and I am as good as, if you know a little bit more, than the causal body, which is all the karmas which keep on giving me not only this body and mind, but any other body and mind. Okay? So this is what your understanding of who this thought is. This is equivalent to 3 plus 2 in this kind of thing. Now, what Upanishads show, which is equivalent to 5, what is that? That yes, this physical body, this subtle body and the causal body are something which are changing all the time. And they are nothing but, if you look at the physical body, it's nothing but atoms and particles which are just put together. You ask any scientist, they'll say this is all just cells. And you know very well that one cell is not I, then billions of cells coming together is also not I. Logic. And it's not some esoteric, on the body and all. Just logic. Then the subtle body. What is subtle body? Subtle body is not what we imagine, some aura and some God knows what and some light and I don't know what. It only means that certain functions of your body which are subtle in nature. What are the functions which are subtle in nature? One thing is the physical eye. The second thing is the capacity of your eyes to see. So while the body is there, you have one physical eye, but the capacity changes over a lifetime. And just by looking at your physical eye, I am not able to see how the capacities are changing. That's why it is subtle. Because you can see it, but I can't see it. Therefore, it is subtle. Right? The mind that you have, I can infer what you are thinking, but I have no access to what you are thinking. So this is what we call subtle. Right? So therefore, this subtle mind with subtle body, which constitutes mind, the capacity of your senses, according to the Vedic model, it is also this atoms and particles that we use. Vedic model is slightly different. It says this body is a combination of Pancha Mahabhuta. What are the Pancha Mahabhutas? Space, air, fire, water and earth put together. Okay. The mind is also a combination of those Pancha Mahabhuta, but they are subtle in nature. Okay. So therefore, that is also not I. Right? Now, what is the causal body? There is a premise that everything in this universe is connected by cause and effect relationship. If you examine the presence of any one given thing in this universe, it is connected to the causes just started, which started just today. No. You look at the simple tree. How many causes? That tree, for it to be here, how many causes?
Sun, light,
yeah, right now, exactly. And how long the sun has been operating, how long the water has been operating, how long, and that has given not only life to this tree, but also what? The seed from which this tree came, and then that seed, right, also gave rise to tree. So it just goes on from tree to seed, seed to tree, and plus all these different factors contributing. How long these cause and effect relationships are going on? And is it only one variable? How many variables are coming together? Infinite variables. The sun, the water, the program of that seed. Where if it is a mango seed, it will give rise only to mango tree. Can you see the design? If you open the seed, there is Chandogya Upanishad. It says, if you open the seed, will you be able to see what is there? It's not, you can't physically see it, but that whole program of what it is going to give only mango fruit is already there. Because if it was not there, you can't plant the seed and have rise of the tree. It is amazing. And then within mango, you will have different varieties. You will have Afus, you will have Kesar, you will have Banganapalli if you are from the south.
Wrong.
And and nothing gets mixed up. And the infinite variety. Okay? So therefore, this whole thing, you must understand the causal. Can we fathom the entire causes of even one tree? Can you say, I know all the past causes which has made this tree available? Even if you can't know in detail all the different causes, you can still say that there is cause and multiple variables. If everything in this universe is not only connected to one singular cause and effect, but multiple cause and effect which are all coming together to give rise to that form at that given point in time, then your presence at this time, can you make a statement that it is just random? Does it make sense? The onus of proving that there are past causes for you to be who you are today is more on the person who says no, because everything around is showing that. It is only logical to believe that there are past causes. Right? So in case of a human being, what are the past causes? Karma. Exactly. So what we say is that cause and effect is in form of actions. So every action that is performed has results. Okay. Now, how many results are accumulated in every human? Is the infinite results, which are, because in a given lifetime, how many different karmas we do? Plenty. Every day, how many karma we do? Every day, thousands. And over a lifetime, thousands. And not only that, the previous karma we are the result of previous karma we are experiencing. And in the process, we are accumulating new karmas because we are responding to situations and we are what? So that means there is this causal body which carries the whole account of karma. Within this whole big account, a given set gives rise to a physical and subtle body in order for us to go through the experiences. Without physical body and mind, you can't go through experiences. Right? So it keeps giving rises to different bodies and mind. So this is what we call, there is a whole big account, which is what we call causal body, Karana Sharira. Now, yeah.
You finish that last one.
Yeah. So the 3 plus 2 part of Tvam is what?
Karma connected.
Exactly. The causal body, the subtle body, and the physical body. This is what we think we are. What is the Vachyartha? What is the Lakshyartha? What is that 5 equivalent? I was just saying 3 plus 2 is equal to 6 minus 1 is an equation. Right? Now, in Veda, the equation is Tat Tvam Asi. Tvam is you, is equated to the cause of the universe. So, what is the equivalent of what I understand Tvam to be? The physical body, the subtle body, and the causal body. What does Veda, what is that point of resolution? What does Veda want to indicate about the nature of mind? It shows who are you? Sat, Chit, and okay? Because all these are variable, they undergo change, they are constantly changing. Who are you is that invariable presence, because of which the changing conditions are known by you. Okay? So therefore, that point of presence where that it shows us you are that awareness or that consciousness, you are none of them. As long as you don't correct that mistake, you are what? Within this whole grind of cause and effect, taking new births, experiencing new results, then in return accumulating new karmas, taking new bodies, and that goes on how long? Anadi. without any end. Right? Now, if in a given lifetime you begin to ask, am I all this or am I something more? And you begin to see, oh my God, I am that awareness. But that's not enough. Okay? Upanishads are not only talking about this individual who takes oneself to be the physical body, the subtle body and the causal body to be that Brahman, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma, Sat, Chit, Ananda. It has another part. What is the other part? Ishvara. Other side of the equation. Okay? In that other side of the equation is what? The cause of the universe. What is the nature of the cause of the universe? Sarvajnaha, Sarva Shaktiman, Ishvara. I can say, yes, I am not the physical body, I am not the subtle body, I am not the causal body. But where did this whole universe, which not only consists of one body, but consists of numerous bodies and consists of numerous cause and effect laws, which put us all together, where did it come from? The other side of the equation, Tat, Ishvara. How did it come about? This is when we say there is that intelligence from which come all these, if you take scientific model, we can say that there are all these subtlest atoms and particles which come about. And they get organized in a way that the whole varied universe, which includes galaxies, which includes what? Planets, sun, moon, everything gets organized. And not only that gets organized, but sitting so far away, our lives are connected, whether you recognize or not. That incredible connection, which we are all part of, is what we call series, that intelligence which manifests the universe and it governs the entire universe. Yes, this is what we call Ishvara. Then we can ask the question, how am I equated to that Ishvara? Because I am certainly, my intelligence is what? My intelligence, even if I try to figure out just any one question, right? If I ask why this rose is red and mogra is white, do I know? Human intelligence is still, you ask one more question. You ask a scientist, we think scientists are the ones who know so much. Yes, they are very rigorous in their inquiry, but there are so many things they don't know. Okay? So therefore, any human intelligence, you can't be equated to that all intelligence which puts together the universe. Then, where is the equation? What is that point of resolution, that phi? This side of the equation is physical body, mind, sense complex, and what it shows is the truth of that is Satyam, Dhanam, Anandam. The other side of the equation is what? All intelligence, which not only brings about one physical and subtle and causal body, but all physical subtle bodies, and all connects all the causes to make the whole universe what it is. That is Ishvara. What Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita say is that all intelligence also requires what? Consciousness. Without consciousness, there is no little intelligence or all intelligence. So the point of resolution is what? Consciousness. The five. Two very seemingly different things resolve in one reality. The wave, which is only a small thing, An ocean, very big, which contains what? All the waves of the past, present and the future. But what is the point of resolution? Water. Because when you look into the wave, what is that? Water plus name and form. Name, wave and form, that little form. When you look at the ocean, what is that? Water plus name and form. What is the name? Ocean. What is the form? Vast. An enlightened wave. What does that enlightened wave know? The forms are different. If the wave starts thinking, I am the ocean, it's making a huge mistake. Because the wave has a form which is a different from ocean form. You can't resolve at that point. What is the point of resolution? Water. Even though wave is small, the truth is the water. Even if the wave is, the ocean is much bigger than any given wave, what is the reality of that ocean? Water. The water appearing as ocean and wave is free from both. Why? Because water is only H2O. It doesn't, the oceanness doesn't stick to the water, waveness does not stick to water. This is what we call the equation Tat Tvam Asi. Anybody who says that Upanishads don't talk about Ishvara doesn't know what they are talking about. Now, Bhagavad Gita. How is Bhagavad Gita then different or from Upanishad? Or how is, there is a slight nuance, there is a slight difference, and that you must understand. It is in that part of Yoga Shastra. So the first teaching of Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita is Brahma Vidya, where you are equated to Ishvara. And you have to understand this equation. Because as long as you live without solving this big equation of life, you are living from a very narrow standpoint. And even if you try to solve the equation by just pretending, oh, I'm awareness, without understanding the presence of Ishvara and all, is just a very partial understanding of what is being talked about.
Can you stop?
Yes.
You talked about the sea.
Yes.
Having a full program
Yes.
of what is going to become after doing this.
Yes.
We talked about karma and past actions is my casual body.
The causal.
Causal body. When I'm born, I've got different parts, heart, and whatever functions. Where is that part of my past karma for 20 births or 100 births? Where is that program, where is it stored in my body?
Yeah, that causal is part, see, any causal is unmanifest. So what is manifest right now is the physical and subtle body, right? The causal, please don't imagine that it is some other place of the universe. Where there is physical and subtle body, that's exactly where the causal body is.
So that program of thousands of years is somewhere in me.
Yeah.
Some say it's in the Kundalini Yoga, about that Shushma Nadi and I need some clarity
So
there. I'm totally
that
confused.
we don't, because see, for us the causal is something which is unmanifest. So therefore there is no location. The location is only for physical and subtle.
But the program is in
So
me.
is there.
Somewhere.
It's there. Yeah, it is there. But it is not something you can't localize it. Because the minute you try to localize it, it then becomes part of your subtle body.
It's not in the soul.
It's not. So this is where the causal is something which is there in form of a potential. But just a given physical and subtle has come out. And through that all the interactions take place. There is no other, the causal doesn't have location which is other than this. Okay? So the minute this physical and subtle body goes away, the causal then moves and takes on another physical and subtle body depending upon which karma is going to manifest. So this is why, I mean, just to tell you that, nowadays, even in the US, this past life regression and all is very much in fashion, right? They make you go through some past life and all. That means that it's all there. The whole program of what all you were and what all the experiences you went is right here. But
If all that is true, or is that something your mind dreams up, or it's...
Now, see, the whole thing is, we don't get caught in that. Because what is the premise of Vedanta? What is the premise? You are not even the causal body. You are that Satyam, Dhanam, Anantam, Brahma. If you get totally caught up, it's like, getting totally caught up in this one physical body and trying to understand each cell and how it, interacts with others. But what is the point? The point is, what Vedas are talking about is you are free from this body. So therefore, the whole, if you really understand what Vedanta is talking, you don't get carried away by what are the causes, what karmas I must have done, and try to decipher all of that and try to understand in detail, because it is infinite. You'll never be able to understand. The only way is to understand, yes, there are cause and effect relationships, but who am I? I'm not even the karma which is going to give me infinite bodies. I am that awareness. That is the only way to get out of that whole thing. Otherwise, you stay within that model and there is infinite, you can't fathom the whole thing. So the purpose that we have is not to get carried away with that. It is actually to solve that equation. Okay? So therefore, if I understand that there are some past causes which gives me the body that I want, and every situation that comes in my life are due to some past causes, I need not know exactly what are the situations which caused this particular thing. I can understand that once that cause and effect relationship works, then if I change the way I look at the situation, and if I behave differently, then what? The outcomes will be different. Once I understand that, that's enough. I don't need to know all the different details. Otherwise, I get caught in what? Jungle of information, which doesn't actually give me any wisdom. It is like, the scientist. There are two types of scientists. One scientist is going on in detail and detail and detail and detail of everything, and then finding out something more. The other scientist is what? Understanding the global picture, which creates a whole different paradigm shift. One is a mind which is getting drowned in the detail. The other one is what? Sees the whole picture and understands conceptually what is happening. And for Vedanta, you need both. You need details and you need to understand the global. Otherwise, so many Vedantins get caught in all these details and there is no end to that information. And they miss the whole big purpose. Because the purpose of Upanishad is not to give you details about your karma and where they are stored and what happens and which is the mechanism and what happens after the death. It's not talking about that. It only talks about all this will continue until the time that you know your true nature. Okay, so that is what we call Brahma Vidya. The second part is Yoga Shastra. Yoga Shastra is, this equation is not something that I can just solve like that. I need to be prepared for it. This is something which is, Lord Krishna says, this knowledge remains, it's what we says, Rajavidya Rajaguhya. Every secret is a secret till the time that you reveal it. Right? This secret is, even if the teacher goes on revealing it, if the student is not ready, it remains a secret. So that means the final card of what you understand, how much you understand, whether you understand it correctly or you have an illusion of understanding, all that remains in whose hand? The same laws, Ishvara. So therefore, nobody can fool Ishvara. Nobody is smart enough to fool Ishvara. So that means the only way to understand this equation is what? Understand that every capacity that is given to me is within this Ishvara. The whole equation and the possibility of solving, where does it come from? Where is that source of knowledge? No human being creates any knowledge. You must understand that. Okay? Way before Einstein discovered that time and space is relative. Time and space was relative or not? It was relative. Humanity believed that time and space is absolute. Whole Newtonian physics is what? Based on this understanding. But what is the reality? The reality was that time and space was relative. Did Einstein create this reality? No. What did he do? He discovered that fact. That fact already was. What did he do? How did he discover the fact? By removing what? His ignorance. That ignorance which made not only him but everybody else believe that time and space was relative. Because of his preparation, what happened? After years of physics, it's not like he just kind of was sat under the tree and one day it just kind of dawned. He spent his life thinking about things. And as a result of that preparation, what happened? That reality which was already there, what? The ignorance of that reality was removed from his buddhi. Now, having understood that, do you think that everybody, all the other scientists just believed whatever Einstein did? One day people were saying time and space is absolute. Next day Einstein says, no, it is relative. So everybody says, yes, Mr. Einstein, whatever you say, we agree. Did that happen? No. He had to stand in front of the entire scientific community and he had to prove that how what he was saying is more right than what the humanity has been believing. How did he show? How did he show? People who are sitting around you and me who don't understand anything about physics are to all those scientists who also have very rigorous thinking. He exposed his theories and he showed how what he had discovered was non-contradictory. Okay. And then whatever other way of looking at it is what? Not something which can, that there are flaws in that logic. You have to do both things. You have to say what I'm saying is flawless, but if you take another standpoint which is counter to that one, then it will fall apart logically somewhere. You have to do both. This is the whole process of proving anything. You postulate. If it is not like this, let's assume it's not like this, then where do you fall apart? Where your logic falls apart. That is rigorous process of thinking. Now, the rishis did exactly the same. They discovered this reality and they said, hey, we are not the creators of this reality. This reality that all that is here is one. There is an inherent equation between an individual and the cause of the universe. Is something which I expose and I give all the possible arguments to show how it is non-contradictory. And not only I show that it is non-contradictable, but I say, okay, let's assume that I am not that, and then what are the logical flaws? So this is how the whole teaching tradition has evolved. The teaching tradition is such that it is not making just a loose statement, just random statement, you are the whole, you are one with Ishvara. It is extremely rigorous. Every statement, if you have noticed, when I make that statement, it is substantiated with what? Reasoning, arguments. Because the whole teaching tradition is like that. It's rigorous. You don't just make statements and get away with it. But in order to follow all these arguments, your buddhi has to be subtle. Otherwise it seems like, oh my God, this is just too much. So therefore, to make your buddhi subtle, your buddhi to examine things and able to figure out things, you need preparation. Just as the equation, I want to solve Einstein's equation and I have relatively good buddhi. But do you think that I can just understand what the physicist understands tomorrow? No. I need to go through what discipline of physics for a number of years before I can understand all the intricacies. In order to solve this equation, you also, your mind needs to go through that subtlety. What is that subtlety that the mind has to go through? In simple things, we are all confused. We are not able to assess situations accurately and to come up with the right answer of what should I do. A little overwhelming situation happens to me and I get angry, I get into grief. So what is the nature of my mind? Or that the verse is, oh, I'm spiritual, so therefore what? I should be immune to all this, so you completely block yourself off. That is another huge problem. And that is more dangerous. Because you think you are evolving, but actually there is what they call, in psychology, it is called a huge problem of dissociation. Dissociation means, you have tools now. You listen to Vedanta and you say, oh, Jagat is mithya. So therefore, I should be indifferent. All these therefores that you have created, they are all your wrong understandings. And this is how you move further and further from reality. What Vedanta says is, hey, if you really want to understand this equation, you have to learn to what? Make your buddhi subtle and refined. How? The starting point is you need to understand the presence of Ishvara. You can't say the world is mithya, therefore forget it. The presence of Ishvara in terms of all the different laws that govern the universe. The intelligence, when you see it from the standpoint of what? How the physical planets are put together, you give the name. What is the name? Physics. The intelligence which makes the plant here, standing here, get the energy from the sun through the process of photosynthesis is what? Ishvara. I give it a name. What is the name? Biology. The intelligence which puts together billions of cells in my body, which enables it to do these multiple functions. When I see it from that standpoint, what do I call it? Physiology, anatomy. The same intelligence when I see it from the standpoint of my emotions and emotions of others. You go and see a psychologist, by the time you tell your story, the psychologist knows very well what is going on, because he has seen so many others and there are similar patterns. If you have gone through this is how you will feel. That intelligence in form of psychology. Then you have two other critical orders. Order of dharma and the order of karma. The same intelligence which gives every human being an understanding of what is right and what is wrong. That is what we call dharma. And if I choose my actions which are going against dharma, then there are consequences. Whether I want it or not, there are consequences. That is what we call karma. If I am intelligent and if I want to prepare myself for this big equation, to solve that big equation, what is the first condition that I must do? Understand the nature of the universe and what? Align myself to what? All these different laws. I can't afford to say I don't care about laws, the world is mithya, I don't care about laws of gravity. I will say, okay, you don't care, you go and you jump. What will happen? Laws of gravity are going to work on you whether you believe in them or not. So the smart thing to do is to align yourself to first recognize the presence of Ishvara as all these different laws which govern the universe, and then align your life. When you do that, what will happen? Will you try to bypass the laws of psychology? Will you? No. You will understand the laws of psychology and you will align. If you have anger, if you have a sense of sadness, there are some causes. You will look into the causes and you will take care of them. That is what we call human growth. Helping yourself. Otherwise, what happens is, you just kind of say, oh Ishvara, Ishvara, Ishvara. You don't even know what it means to relate to Ishvara. This is what Bhagavad Gita says is bhakti. Bhakti doesn't mean that you are just sitting and chanting and doing bhajans and all that. Bhakti means you are bringing to your understanding the presence of that, invariable presence of that intelligence which is manifesting in so many different ways, and then you are aligning your life to all these different laws. This is how you prepare for this knowledge. If there is law of dharma, that means psychology, what does it mean? That if I have those emotions, I can't say, oh, I am that awareness which is free from those emotions, and then I'll just repeat like a parrot, oh, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. What does Lord Krishna say? You need to understand laws of psychology, and within those laws of psychology, you help yourself and free yourself relatively from all these afflictions that you have. What are the afflictions? Anger, envy, sadness, fear, greed. So you need to help yourself. You need to look into it. You need to look into what is causing it, where are the distortions, and then what? Correct those distortions. Because unless you correct, you are just, there is no foundation for that big picture to be clear. If one has difficulty in just operating from whatever one, this is what Bhagavad Gita is saying, that the general way we engage in the world is for our raga and dvesha. I go for what I like and I try to avoid what I dislike. And in going for what I like, sometimes I lose sight of dharma. Because what I like becomes so important, I don't consider enough what are the repercussions of my actions. So what it says is, you need to incorporate dharma into decision making. This is what we call bhakti. Why? Because you have taken into account in your actions what? The intelligence which exists in form of what? Ishvara in form of dharma. And you are aligning your life to that. This is bhakti. This is Bhagavad Gita definition of bhakti. Because until all these different alignments take place, Brahma Vidya will remain a secret. Because nobody's life is totally aligned. When you come to Vedanta, everybody is totally free from all different emotional afflictions. Everybody is totally free from, does one have a total and 100% understanding of what is dharma. Then when things don't happen your way, we have a habit of what? Blaming ourselves, blaming the world. All these different distortions we have, until we undo all these distortions, this knowledge will remain the secret. So bhakti, according to Bhagavad Gita and according to Upanishads talk about preparation. They use a different language. Dharmam chara, satyam vada. All these amazing the different, and then it says, if you are at times confused about what is the right action, what is the wrong action, go to a wise person. All these things are given. In Bhagavad Gita, it talks about align your life to Ishvara, which is in form of all these different laws. Both are talking about Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra. Yoga Shastra is one's preparation. So therefore, every point, the law of karma will enable you to what? It's a kind of a, yesterday there was a very, it was a very simple, there is an organization called Indus, and the topper, the person who gave a talk, she was a very sweet lady, and she just gave very small practical tips to how to first detect our distortions and how to work on it. Okay. So there was no big thing of Ishvara or whatever, but she just gave some simple techniques. Simple techniques were fun. It was quite interesting. She says that let's say if you have fear, then what do you do? If you keep on saying, oh, I have fear, and I have fear, and I have to get rid of fear, but how do you then get fear? How do you get rid of fear? So she says simple technique. Find out what is opposite of fear. What is opposite of fear?
Courage.
Courage. Right? And where does courage come from?
Facing fear. Facing it, trying to do more.
facing, exactly, instead of retrieving, you face and things like that. So she says, instead of trying to get rid of fear, you start cultivating courage. And how do you cultivate courage? She says you don't have to have this big goals, right? She says every time, let's say that you have fear, the fear manifests sometimes as, oh, you can't just go out alone, you always need a company. So start going out for 5 minutes. Then next day you increase it to 10 minutes. Right? Or that you have fear of being alone. Then you just say, okay, now 5 minutes, So he said, actually start acting and gathering courage. Small things. And he says, the experience of that courage, that you are able to cross all these self-defined boundaries, will give you so much confidence that over a period of time, the weight of that courage will become more than the fears. And then it will become easier and easier. Then you actually begin to experience how much freedom there is in the courage. And then you want to act more and more according to that, and you slowly, very naturally get rid of this fear. She gave another example which was very interesting, it was a very sweet talk, She says, let's say you have a problem of envy, that you feel, that somebody is really well and you feel small and you feel jealous and all that. So he says, how do you correct that? So she said that actually somebody's well-being is invoking what discomfort in you. So you have to begin to feel good when something is good. Right? The opposite. When somebody or something is good, you have to, instead of feeling small, you have to feel good. Then there is no jealousy. If something is good and I feel good about it, is there a jealousy? There is no jealousy. So she says, how do you cultivate that? She says, with reference to people, it may be difficult. So you start with plants. When plants are beautiful, it doesn't evoke smallness in you. So every day you exercise and you tell that, oh, the plants are beautiful and I'm feeling so happy because of that. The sun is beautiful. You start noticing and you start rejoicing in goodness. He says, over a period of time, you begin to enjoy that thing, that some good thing doesn't evoke smallness in you, it evokes what? Joy, and that makes you feel so good. So then you slowly move to individuals. And this is how every distortion of ours, Vedanta cannot be an escape, because Vedanta says the world is mithya, it cannot be used as an escape to undo all these distortions that exist in our mind. Because a mind which is fraught with distortions cannot, Ishvara will not reveal that reality accurately to that person. This is the law. You can't bypass laws. You need to align. Without that alignment, there is no foundation on which the knowledge can stay. And entire practice of Yoga Shastra is creating that foundation. And for that foundation, you need to understand how Ishvara pervades the universe, and you need to correct every distortion. And that requires effort, and it's not going to happen automatically. Okay? And that whole process, according to Bhagavad Gita, is bhakti. So that means you need to redefine what you mean by bhakti. For us, unfortunately, bhakti is confined to what? Just sitting in the temple and doing bhajans. It is a whole different way of what? Understanding understanding, because bhakti means relating to Ishvara. And Ishvara is in form of everything, all the laws. And aligning yourself to all the laws and helping yourself to let go the distortions and making yourself healthy, the deserving recipient of the knowledge is what we call bhakti. There is no Vedantin without, our teacher used to say, without being a bhakta. But not that traditional bhakta that we think. It's a much larger definition and really transforming yourself. Transforming yourself in, and how do you know anytime whether you are distorted in your thinking or not? How do you recognize?
Inner voice.
Huh?
So inner voice is just very
No, you feel you're not comfortable.
Exactly.
Always not.
That mechanism is there. You may choose to ignore it, but that mechanism is there, which is part of that intelligence.
This consciousness.
Yeah. That is something which is constantly talking to you about the nature of your interaction with the universe. We may choose to shut it out, but it is there. Learn to listen to it. And this is why this whole prayer that we do in the morning, Bhurbhuva Swaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodaya. What? Light up my mind so that it is freed from what? Confusion, error, wrong thinking, ignorance. Every day starts with that prayer because human buddhi is so fragile and it can go on a tangent, and once it goes on a tangent we can have thousands of reasons to let it go, and that only creates misery for us and for others. So that means this is what we call bhakti. Bhakti is a very, very potent thing, and in order to be a real bhakta, it requires a lot of maturity. Okay? And therefore, in this verse, he says, how did you know that you have grown enough? One of the indications is nirvairaha sarvabhuteshu. So much of our life is lived with all such implicit assumptions. You know, when I say I am a victim, or that I feel that I am a failure, or something is wrong, you know, there is some lack, some inadequacy, there is always some resentment, and resentment doesn't stay as an abstract concept. Resentment is always towards what? Some people. Certain events happen, but the events don't happen without people. There are people involved in those events, and those events give you pain. So where are you carrying that? Are you carrying that pain with reference to the events or with reference to the people? With reference to the people who are part of those events. So that means every situation which did not happen your way, okay, you carry the weight of that situation not in form of the situation but in terms of what? People who are connected to those situations and those events. So that means your mind is carrying what? People. And your disappointment or your sadness or your anger or and everything is directed towards people. When you have worked on yourself enough, what is the indication? Nirvairaha sarvabhuteshu. All the people that you are carrying within yourself in form of resentment, frustration, anger, all those accounts are settled.
If you blame yourself, would you have resentment against yourself?
Yes. And therefore, Sarva Bhuteshu also includes yourself. See, generally we think Sarva Bhuteshu includes only others. But Sarva Bhuteshu also includes yourself. So that means any resentment that you have towards yourself. Why did I not do that? Right? But that I'm a failure, I didn't do this, I didn't live my life. All that also has to be free. This is a huge work. Huge. Imagine that you have a mind which is free. It is not holding on to anything, not either in terms of people or in terms of these general opinions, which are generalized opinions about world is unfair. World is unfair means what? People don't act fairly, right? We make the statement world is unfair, but world, there is no entity called world independent of people.
Sometimes we blame nature and God has done this to me. So
Exactly.
if there's a situation.
So, yeah, because I don't understand. So therefore, all the resentment that I carry towards people, I have to free myself of. And how can I free myself of the resentment towards people? So I really, many people will know I've been wrong. Somebody has been really bad to me. Right? How do you free yourself of that?
Clearing it out of that.
Okay, one possibility, this is very good. Now let's explore possibilities. There is no one way of doing it.
Forgiveness.
One is, as Preeti says, you clear it out with the other person. One of the things that we don't do enough in this world is communicate. We don't really communicate our real feelings and our real thoughts. Because what happens is, at times, what happens, I feel, oh my God, if I tell this, the person may get angry.
What will be their reaction?
The person may react. So our whole commitment is to not let it be. Right? But the minute I say let it be, means I have not used my free will to resolve that situation. When I let it be, do you think it is really, I forget? It remains with you and it really, and then it builds up. And when it builds up, what happens? One day, you blow up, you explode.
My wife's word, never mind.
How could we miss at least one?
There is few word like Namu, Namiksa, Namu.
So, here, as Preeti says, okay, it may lead to confrontation, but that is just my imagination. I'm just thinking.
Can even lead to your health getting spoiled.
Yeah, exactly. So many of these present day illnesses are all what?
Unresolved issues.
Unresolved
Very
issues. I have a group of, I think I told you in this class, I have my uncle is a founder of Department of Psychiatry in Bombay. His name is Dr. Raya. And his son is also a psychiatrist and his son is also a psychiatrist. So 3 generations of psychiatrists. And we met him in a party and we said, now how have you seen the psychiatry evolving in India and all over the world? And he says that when we asked that middle, right? So he says when my father was practicing psychiatry, people thought that only crazy people go to psychologists and psychiatrists. And they are like mad and and he says now when my son is practicing, they said how much everything that you feel, everything that you think, your health, every parameter of your being is connected with your psychology. Unresolved issues won't disappear. Whether you come to Vedanta or you go to anything, they will not disappear. They need your attention. And they need for you to what? You need to recognize and you need to work on it. Okay? So therefore, the not carry people in your mind, engage in conversation. Even if it is unpleasant, your commitment, please remind yourself, your commitment is to the truth. Your commitment is not to hush-push things just for the peace, the so-called imagined peace, which is a very short term and a non-existent peace. But when you communicate, how you communicate is also up to you. Generally, when we communicate, what is our tendency? You're like that, you did this to me, and you're like really, and this is how we just start blaming the other person. Do you think the other person is just going to sit and listen to you and say, yes, you're all absolutely right? The person will what? Either switch off or start blaming you in return.
It's like you're attacking someone.
You're attacking somebody, right? So therefore, you try to learn, because there is no other way. You first tell yourself that I cannot but communicate. Secondly, but I can choose to communicate in a what? More exactly. A way where you state what you feel. Instead of saying you are bad, you did this to me, you can say I feel hurt and I feel sad. Because this is how I understood. Then what happens? You also give the other person an opportunity to what? Explain. This is how you engage in a dialogue. The dialoguing, when you express what you have to say and you also equally openly listen to what other person is saying, is where you begin to resolve conflict. And that courage, that you have to gather that courage. Because we all have the tendency of forget it, or it will be too uncomfortable. But we have to learn to cultivate it. Okay? That is only one of the ways. What are the other ways of not keeping human beings in your mind? There are so many people who have gone, towards whom you carry, let's say, resentment. You can't call a person who has already departed and say, now I want to talk to you. What will you do? Forgive. How do you forgive?
You let bother you. Maybe you can't forget sometimes, but you don't hold it with you gradually.
Somehow.
You say, good, he's dead. I'm rid of him.
That's about
Say for someone who cheated me, he's gone.
He's gone. Exactly. What do you
How
do?
do you handle this?
How do you handle it?
Ask her.
See, one, unfortunately,
Maybe you have cheated somebody in your previous life.
Okay.
That's why you have always
That's
true.
It's
I think one way to that
one, use your, it's your
I think
one way to do it is to always look at what you attracted that brought that on. Because then the onus comes on to you. And most things are a reflection of what you have kind of, you desired something, or you were foolish in some way, or you done that.
Yeah, one very good way of doing. See, what Namita is saying is very right, that we often blame others and we don't actually enough look at our responsibility in the situation, right? So this is also a very nice way of, you feel this person did wrong, but then the other side of it is, what could I have done to attract that behavior? That's a nice discipline. Because we generally always think the other is to be blamed and I am the right one, right? But if we carry it too far, what happens is you always feel that you are responsible for everything. Sometimes the problem belongs to somebody else and you take it on as your own problem. And that is also not required at times. I'll give you a very, in psychology, this is something which happens to almost every human being, which is a misplaced responsibility. Where, let's say, as a child sees parents fighting. The child has got nothing to do with this fight. But the child somehow in the vision of child, my parents are infallible. My parents are like gods. So now something is not in place, I must be responsible for it. So this is where we say we take on responsibility which does not belong to us. This is again a distortion. When I overtake responsibilities for situations for which I am not responsible, then also, right, I get into all the time somebody else is doing something and I blame myself, where I will not take enough actions to help myself. Even this karma model, it's sometimes very dangerous. You say, oh, it must be my karma, therefore I am going through this difficulty. You don't make enough effort to yeah. So dealing and keeping people out is very easy to say, but not so easy to do. And to do it really rationally and carefully. It requires a lot of sophistication where I do all of that, but don't get totally carried away in one framework or the other to the extent that it becomes another distortion. Neither I take no responsibility, nor I take all responsibility.
I see lots of parents getting that into with their children. Anything goes wrong with the child and they blame and say, oh, maybe I
No.
did. You know, not knowing that a grown child has got his own karma, he's got his own deeds,
Absolutely.
he's 30, he's working,
Yes.
he's not doing, it's
Yes.
not mine. But they go through so much
So much
misery
pain.
because
Yes.
of that.
Yes.
There's just no
Yes.
way they can.
Yes.
But everybody said that in my office, you can't.
But everybody, that's why though you're here, because you're not everybody, you should not get affected.
Everything is being from the mother. The child does something wrong.
I will stop now. Just
That sounds familiar, right?
so think about your homework. Think about different ways in which you can have healthy relationships and don't carry people in your mind, carry people in form of resentments in your mind. What are the different ways, right? And be a little bit subtle, because there is no, every rule that you have will have the flip side. So how to have that balanced view?
The whole thing is
But
balance.
in which all areas? One is communication, one is looking at oneself, what are the areas? You deconstruct ideas, only then you change. Because otherwise it becomes very easy to say, oh, don't carry, forgive people, let it be. But that doesn't change anything.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, I think so many things build up. Then at so many
Exactly.
areas that you feel forgive, let go,
But it doesn't happen.
it somehow bursts into an unwanted,
Exactly.
it's like a water
Attitude.
stream.
Yes.
Then it trickles, and at some point it just comes out in which you not
Absolutely.
anticipate.
Absolutely. That's why you need to stay with it. All these ideas, this is why Bhagavad Gita is not a book of advice. I'm not sitting here and telling you, oh, forgive people, oh, don't keep them in mind. No. The whole trick of Bhagavad Gita is what is understand human mind and delicately work with it to undo all these distortions. This is an intricate process. And you have to be compassionate to yourself, and you need to be compassionate to others, and you also need to incorporate the reality of Ishvara in that whole equation.
Understanding.
But what are the different
Incorporate.
things? Yeah. All these things we will talk about in detail next time.
Next is Thursday again.
Yeah, back to